Comics Coast to Coast is brought to you by patrons like you. If you'd like to help the show out, head on over to patreon.com/comicsc2c and show us a little bit of your love. Your sweet, sweet love. I mean, like $1 worth of love. And we'll take that love and hug it and squeeze it and make it do podcast things that you'll enjoy. So come on, see what happens.
This is Comics Coast to Coast.
All right, this is Brian Dunaway, and you're listening to Comics Coast to Coast, episode 311, the Kyle Marshall interview. Before we talk to Kyle, let's reach over here and talk to Joel. Welcome, Joel Duggan, back. Joel Duggan of Forge Publishing. Joel, how are you?
I am fantastic. I'm not at all exhausted. Not at all exhausted. I'm fantastic.
That's great. Did you notice how I mentioned your name like four times in that intro? It's like that repetitive name thing where I think people were forgetting about you because
I miss 1 week and everybody just kind of falls off the train.
It's fickle. Speaking of people who are not here, Matthew Descharme is out this week with a sore throat, so send him your well wishes. Check out mattthewad.com. Go to YouTube and check out the videos. Hey, it's supposed to be Christmas is coming up soon, right? And one of my favorite parts of Christmas is I like to put pressure on Matthew to do his little Matt the Wad Christmas special things that he always does. I enjoy those so much. So there, you've been challenged. Matthew Descharme. All right, so here we are with our guest, Kyle Marshall. How are you doing, Kyle?
Good. How are you guys doing?
We're doing excellent. If you have not seen Kyle Marshall's work, you should head over to houseofkyle.tumblr.com. Is that a good place for people to check out your work, Kyle?
Yeah, and then I'm trying out this Instagram thing. I'm not real good with social media, but I'm trying to get on that stuff a little more. And so let me just real quickly figure out what my name is again. It was Kyle's Sandwiches and Ice Cream. I just needed a name, and that's kind of when I retire from this business, I'm going to open up my own shop.
That is a great afterlife plan. Mm-hmm. So thank you, Kyle, for being on the show with us tonight. We really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us. I know you're an animator. I know those guys are always super busy. It always seems like those guys are overworked. But, Kyle, could you share just a little bit about yourself as an animator and director?
So I guess lately I've been here working in California at Nickelodeon, working on The Loud House.
Yes.
Which is a show, it's been out for, I don't know, a little over a year. Honestly, I find that time in LA, it just blends together because there's no rain or season, so I can't remember when things start or when they end.
I think is it 2000. It's been around a little while, right? It's been around for longer than a minute. Yeah, it's been a little over a year, I guess, a year and a half that it's been out. So I started as a board artist on the show, and now board supervising and directing on The Loud House. And then I had my own show, the Three Amigonauts, that was on YTV in Canada. It just premiered this summer. So. Yeah, I'm excited about it. I've seen The Loud House. I enjoy The Loud House. If you have not seen The Loud House, it centers around some interesting characters, primarily one boy who is surrounded by these 10 great sisters, right?
Yeah, it was really Chris Savino who created the show. It's a pretty good hook. It's just one boy, 10 girls, and it's just about how he tries to survive and kind of get around these 10 obstacles in his life. So, and then, as the seasons have progressed, we start to get into more of the sisters in their world.
Right.
It's a good show that I think kids can easily find relatable, and I think that's kind of what's brought a lot of success to it. So.
Right. I want to hear more about the Three Amigonauts here shortly, but we probably need to finish covering The Loud House. But the Three Amigonauts is something I have not seen yet. You said it just premiered this past month, right?
When was it? Yeah, in August. You probably won't see anything for it. I've been trying to find it online, but it's pretty tough.
It's not hard to find. It is as hard as someone who lives in the United States to watch an exclusive Canadian joint. I feel like I've been put out. I'm like, come on, Canada, give me some of this animation goodness.
Yeah,
give it to me.
I think it'll because there's no YTV because it's just a Canadian broadcaster, and then
right.
I believe that the Amigonauts have sold to the UK and some countries in Europe and Asian markets, but I don't know exactly when they'll be coming out or anything like that.
I want it. I want it in America. Dadgummit anyway.
I feel like I have to interject and be like, yeah, now you know how we feel, Brian. Just welcome to Canadian Netflix.
Yeah, Netflix got better when I moved down here.
Oh yeah, I bet so. Oh, you suck. All right, so okay. All right, so you mentioned you do storyboards as well as occasionally direct episodes of Nickelodeon's animated series, The Loud House. How occasional has directing become for you?
For The Loud House, I started on season 2 directing. It was like every sixth, about that. And then Chris Savino does. He created and he basically directs every episode, which is really rare. Most shows like Nick and Cartoon Network and stuff, usually the creators have other directors and they just kind of oversee everything. Right, but he's a man of many talents, and so he started to bring me on to kind of relieve him of some of the duties he had to do. And so I started board supervising and directing on that, kind of one every 6 episodes or so, and then now I'm doing about it's about half.
Right.
We pretty much split it now.
That's awesome. Do you have something you prefer? Like, do you prefer to storyboard, or do you like directing and supervising more?
I always love storyboarding, and when I find when I'm directing, you still get in there and do some boarding.
Oh, cool.
Because you'll have your board artists, they'll hand some stuff in, and maybe you want to plus something, or maybe a scene isn't working quite the way you want it to, or sometimes too you get it in automatic. Like you'll finish your board, and the episode can only be 10 minutes and 45 seconds. And once you get the storyboard and everything in the animatic with all the dialogue, maybe it comes in and it's 2 minutes over. And so you got to go and you got to start pulling in a lot of threads, and you got to kind of rewrite and do some boarding to make things fit again. And so, but yeah, I love dark. I like seeing the whole thing. It's fun to kind of be in all of it and kind of have your vision there. Boarding, some people say it's like you're the first director on an episode, because you're the first one taking the script and really going at it. And so I always like boarding that way. And then too, I really like the directing part of it, because you kind of you see the process all the way through from script to final mix with sound and everything. So
right, is it kind of like teaching someone to tie your shoe or to tie their shoe? Because I know when you tie your shoe, we all kind of know it on the inside, but when you're telling somebody else how to do it, you kind of discover a bunch of things you didn't know. It's like, oh, the rabbit does go around the loop.
Yeah, it is a thing. Like you mean in learning how to kind of direct people into falling into your vision. Yeah, you kind of have to learn how to do that. And in the beginning, I was definitely someone that I'd have to draw by example, because I couldn't always explain what I wanted, and so I'd always be hands-on drawing or trying to color or do things a certain way. But you'd start to learn how to direct people by just kind of giving them instruction and teaching them. You got to learn how to delegate more. Whereas I found, I started directing in Canada at Mercury Filmworks. I don't know if you heard of a show. It's called Atomic Puppet. It came out 2 years ago or so on Teletoon.
I don't think I've heard that one.
Yeah, and so I directed on the first 10 episodes, and so I kind of learned a way there to kind of direct. And then when I got here, took some of that knowledge and just seeing how they did things here. And it's a lot more delegation here, where in Canada it's a lot more hands-on, because there's less of a crew and less money, less time, all that stuff.
Less of everything, yeah.
It is. It's a less of everything.
Yeah. In some of whenever we talk to animators on the show, especially people that are working in the States, I always recall, I mean, obviously I haven't been in the industry around here in about 10 years, but I always recall my time in television going like, wow, what it would have been like to have different departments for different sort of things. It's like up here it was like, oh, we're working on a children's show. So first you're going to board it, then you're going to key animate it, and then you're going to tween it, and then we're going to, hopefully it gets passed. It's like, and the animator on the show is like, I have to do, wait, what?
Yeah. I found, especially like when, like beginning in Canada, one of my first jobs was at Trapeze. Like one of my first full-time gigs was at Trapeze in PEI. And we pretty much did everything. And so then when I moved on and I kept moving in my career, you keep learning how to do all these different facets of the pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found when I came here to the States, people are kind of in their own area a bit more. Like they're a designer, they're a board artist, whereas I kind of did everything on the production. And so I think it was easier for me to step into a directing role, I think. Because I kind of knew the process better.
Yeah, well, and even just spending, I mean, like spending a day in someone's shoes that you're going to be supervising, you're way more aware of what you're asking. Like if you're asking them to redo something, you're like, this is going to be really simple, or like, I understand I'm asking a lot of work from you, but this is what we have to do. And changing how you present that, allows the person to then, kind of get on board with your version, especially if they understand that that you're asking a lot and all that kind of stuff. I do recognize Atomic Puppet, but I think the other thing on your IMDb page that kind of caught my eye as far as something that I recognized was it's another Canadian show. What was it called? Jimmy Two Shoes. Yeah.
I've definitely seen that.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of episodes of that. I remember watching that with my buddy Peyton.
Oh.
Yeah, no, that was a fun show too.
Yeah, that was one what was it? It was like one of my first jobs. Like right after I left Trapeze, I was at Trapeze for a year, and then I moved to Ottawa, and I started as an animator, and then my first character design job was the first season of Jimmy Two Shoes.
Nice, yeah, I love the designs on that show. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think at the time it was a really different Canadian show, and so it was really good to work on because we all kind of had this idea that we're trying to do something a little different, and it was a really good place to learn because there's a bunch of guys that were more experienced than myself that on the design crew that kind of took me under the wing and showed me a lot of stuff. And then when we did season 2, I got promoted to assistant director, and I started to do some boards in between those 2 seasons, and so that was good. I got to cut my first animatics and kind of see a lot of different parts of the process. Yeah, it was good to kind of get in there and be a part of that. So
in terms of like the design and some of the different things that you were attempting with Jimmy Two Shoes, do you find that there was a big difference between Canada and the US as far as character design, or was there more room for wiggling in the States?
I don't know, like you have more designers in the States. Like we have 2 separate crews for design. So like for every half hour of the Loud House, there's two episodes, and so on each one of those episodes we have a crew that does designs. So there's a character designer, prop designer, location designer, and then there's a floater that kind of does a bunch of stuff, and then you have color people all for that episode, and then you have a whole team for that other episode. Whereas in Canada, I was the only character designer on Jimmy Two Shoes, but we would have a couple people doing freelance, like special poses and stuff. And I think I find in TV in general, like you get a lot more freedom. Like some of my friends that are in feature, there's so much money in feature that I think there's less risk that they can take. Whereas TV, I find usually as long as it's good by standard and practices, like S&P, like as long as we're not, putting body parts that we should be showing on characters and stuff like that, we're good. Like they'll be good about the design, And I especially found with 3 Amigonauts, the broadcaster YTV, they were awesome. Like they basically said just make the show. We kind of proved to them what we wanted to do in the beginning, and then like Matt Sheppo, our executive, he just let us run with it, and he was really good at trying to promote our basic the idea that we want to do for the Amigonauts. So I've never had any problems with broadcasters. It's always been pretty good.
That's great. Oh, so we're talking about 3 Amigonauts now, so that's great. Also let you know, congratulations on getting the show picked up.
Thank you.
Is it everything you had hoped it would be?
No, it was a tough 2 years. Like I was making it, like I was kind of overseeing it here. My wife and I moved down to LA here to work in Nickelodeon, and a month later, Amigonauts got picked up.
Oh, wow.
And so instantly it's like, man, what do we do? And we just moved here, and we're like, you know what, we can't move back. And so one of my best friends in the animation industry, Mike Geiger, we got him to direct the show. And so he was directing it in Toronto, and then I kind of oversaw stuff from here. And so it was tough because I do Nickelodeon during the day, and then, Amigonauts at night. And we had an extremely small crew on the Amigonauts. Like everybody worked so hard. It was crazy how hard everybody worked and everything. Like people were doing so many different jobs. Like Joel, we were talking about that before, how many different jobs you can do on a Canadian production. This one was even crazier.
Wow.
Like our character designer was our location designer and prop designer, and he did an episode in a week. Like
Wow.
Oh my God.
The stuff that he did, like it just, what he cranked out in a week is amazing. And so like the production was like that. Like it was fast and it was furious. And there's there's some episodes in it that I'm really proud of, that I think we made something that's really unique, especially for Canadian TV. And then there's some episodes that, to be honest, like I don't ever want to see again.
Yeah.
But that's just part of it. Like, especially in the first season, you're trying to find the show. And there were some of our first episodes, we didn't really have the characters or the stories down yet. But then as we started to pick up, I think we really started to kind of find a good place with the stories. And luckily, like the way we aired it, YTV let me pick the episodes that I wanted to air first.
Oh, nice.
So they gave a lot of control. Like I got to write a number of the episodes for Amigonauts, and it was great. Like in terms of dealing with the broadcaster and everything was great. It was a small team, and it was a crazy amount of hours and that. But the good thing is they gave us some freedom to kind of do some of the stuff that we wanted to. I think a lot of times you'll hear a lot of filmmakers talk about this. The smaller the budget, I think the more freedom you get. Whereas like the big budget films, I think, there's so much money into it. There's going to be a lot more eyes on it. And so we really wanted, I don't know if you guys know Kid Koala. He's a DJ. And we said, hey, this is the guy that we want to do. And we just want to do a quick 30-second intro, which in Canada, no one really does. They usually do kind of a long minute thing that explains the show and, everything else. And we're like, no, we don't want any lyrics. We just want this quick 30-second thing. And we want it by Kid Koala. And they're like, yeah, sure, do it. So we got a lot of freedom to do that kind of stuff. So that was cool.
Well, I am now a Kid Koala fan. So thank you for that.
He does some great stuff.
This is so much fun. Oh, geez. Okay, I got sidetracked. Joel.
Well, and it's funny, like, you're talking about like a designer doing location, prop, background, and character, like all in a week for an episode. And on the surface, I mean, like you'd look up, 3 Amigonauts online, and you get some. I say simple, but I mean deceptively simple character designs and stuff like that. It is still that's still a huge amount of work. And something that I wanted to ask you about, though. Like in Canada, animation school, not that they're all the same, but the curriculum is very similar in that there's a lot of structure, there's a lot of form, you're learning how to draw and how to animate and all this kind of stuff. Amigonauts and Loud House, like your stuff in general, is just so loose. Is that a skill that you had to learn, or is that kind of like your natural drawing style?
Well, first, thanks. I guess when I went to school, I went to a small little school in Saskatchewan that doesn't exist anymore. But it was like I graduated with like 6 people, and it was really great. We had some awesome teachers there, but the guy that ran the school in the beginning, he came from Cal Arts, and he was a big Disney guy. And so we all were like trained to draw Disney, but then when I got out of school, I started to get into just some other stuff like. Just some uglier kind of design, and I was just so tapped into the Disney thing, I want to go the opposite direction.
Right.
And so now I find, especially like with the Amigonauts, that style, when Mike Geiger, the director, and I started talking about what we wanted to do with the style of it, because it used to have a whole different look, but we wanted to make sure that we could animate and we could make the show look as good as possible. So we try to simplify the design more. Sometimes if you do something that's more complex, it can end up looking pretty bad.
Right.
Unless you have a big budget to really make something work. And we just didn't want to tax the animators on having to deal with all these pieces and all this crazy stuff. We wanted to keep it kind of simple and just look fun, But then for my drawing style, I guess, I don't know. I think it's just a mix of just tons of different stuff that I like and I've seen and all kind of mixed together. I don't really think I have my own style. It's just a mix of all these other styles, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I would argue that's what your own style is. I mean, like I think we're all
Good point.
Yeah, I mean, between the people that influence you, current or past, stuff that you pick up subconsciously just kind of gets melded in there. And I mean, there's always that great quote about, good artists copy, great artists steal. And I feel like that's the kind of thing, like you just kind of end up getting like pulled little pieces here and there. I've had some people mention different references that my work reminds them of in comics. And I mean, I can tell that it's not meant to be like a dig. It's meant to be like a compliment. I was like, oh wow, okay, wow, you mentioned some really nice people. Thank you very much. And it's funny because sometimes I don't even realize it because you're trying to do something different and unique in your own thing. So you're trying to move away from anything that you see as like, oh yeah, okay, that's too much, I don't know, John Kay or something like that. So you try to move away from that. But then ultimately people still pick up like that 3%, that got in there, just because it's not your work.
It's funny sometimes how like you say, someone will say like, hey, your work reminds me of this. And I don't know, maybe you guys find this, like I get surprised sometimes. It's like, really, I totally wasn't even looking at that. But I guess somehow when I melted these things together, it came out kind of like that.
Yeah. Well, and it could be really funny, as we go through different artist interviews and stuff like that. I'd be curious if we can connect the dots. You have one artist that says they were influenced by these people, and this other artist that has a very similar style. And then when you boil it down, they're probably influenced by the same kind of group of people that are out there. Yeah. So, and speaking of, I mean, you've mentioned Mike Geiger a few times, but in terms of like some of the influences that you would have been kind of like growing up with, like what were the kind of cartoons and cartoonists that were really kind of influencing you as you were developing as a professional artist?
I found, to be honest, a lot of the stuff, well, I liked, when I was first kind of going in the industry, there was, like Cartoon Network had, it was Flapjack, and I really liked of Flapjack, and some of those Cartoon Network shows were doing. And then for me, it was a lot of people that I worked with. I found that like I would get a board when I was first started as a board artist. A board would come in. I'd start as a board revisionist, and a board would come in, and I had to have to revise some panels. And I would just go through the person's board, and so there are all these board artists that I really look up to. Like so like that kind of trained me for what I like to see in a board kind of thing. So now when I'm teaching people kind of what I want to see on my board team, it's definitely coming from the boards that I've seen before. And like there's some really good board artists in Canada that I've been lucky to work with or get taught by, like Jeff Barker. He's from around the Toronto area. He always had this really loose, beautiful style that he just made drawings and actions just so much fun. And then like Mark Ackland, Ricardo Durante, those are two guys that I always really looked up to, their boards. Then in Ottawa, like Jay McClare and Phil LaFrance, they now own Jamfield. I always really like their boards.
I've heard of Jamfield. I haven't seen anything, but I've
yeah, they're a big studio now. They started pretty small, like a little boutique in Ottawa, and then they got bought out by Boat Rocker, which is a massive international company. And so now Jamfield it's the boutique studio in Ottawa, and then they now own Arc, what used to be Arc went bankrupt like 2 years ago or something like that, and Boat Rocker came in and slapped the Jamfield name on it. So.
Yeah, I probably know some people. I mean, a lot of people from the Halifax region in animation ended up settling in Ottawa because there was a lot more work there. So I think I've seen some people on LinkedIn getting new jobs or getting, having little work anniversaries at Jamfield. That's probably why it's
happening a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, then I was trying to think, because it's usually a question that comes up whenever there's an artist interview. Like who are the people that you're inspired by? And I'm finding now on Instagram, I'm finding people all the time.
Yeah.
And it's almost like I was talking with like my boss Chris Savino the one day. We're just talking about Instagram and how if you're a kid coming out of school right now and you're seeing all these artists on Instagram, you must just like pack your bags and say, nah, I'm Whereas like when growing up in Saskatchewan, it's like you versus, some other farm kid.
Right.
You think you're the greatest artist in the world, so you got a little bit of confidence coming out, But then, but now kids with the internet, it's like, it's great because you get to see so much great work, but at the same time, you get to see how much competition there is out there.
Oh yeah, no, I was talking to very briefly. I had a conversation with Tom Bancroft, and we were talking about stuff, and I had replied to him because he had shared someone's Instagram online because they had sent a book to him. I'm looking for her handle right now, and it is Vixie Arts, VIXIEARTS. She's from, I think she's from Denmark. I think she knows Pernille Orum. But her stuff is mind-blowing. And it's the feeling that I had, and the message that I sent Tom was like, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Also, I hate you for sharing this.
Exactly.
You know, like my week is just like, I'm going into a convention this weekend with no confidence because of this book that you just shared online. But yeah, I agree that, you know, the resources that are out there, it's amazing, and it's also something that you have to be very careful with, because I'll notice it sometimes when I go to actually look at someone's very specific profile as opposed to just my feed. The feeling I get from my feed is that I am behind and everybody is posting all the time. But when you go and you look, you're like, no, this artist that I follow really only posts maybe once a day. But I follow 600 people. Half of them are artists. So I'm just getting this constant roll, you know, of inspiration. But depending on my mood that day, it might also be a kick in the nuts, you know. Like it's
make you feel lazy pretty quick.
Yeah, exactly. You know, well, I mean, and working with, you want to talk about feeling lazy, like working with Piper Tibbett over the last 3 years. I mean, that she paints once a day and like posts it online, and you're just kind of like, how? But how do you even? And it just keeps on going, you know. It's just, it's. I think it's ultimately I do get a lot of inspiration from social media. So, and you mentioned actually, I think it might have even been pre-show that you're kind of new to Instagram.
Yeah, I think I've had one for a year and a half, maybe 2 years, but I didn't really post anything for a while. Mm-hmm. And then I started to see that, you know, you can get your name out there, and it kind of helps you. With pitching with anything. And I really started to think about it when the Amigonauts was coming out, because YT, like the Canadian broadcasters, they give you a lot of freedom to do your own show, but they don't have the promotion. That I think that would be my one criticism with Canada, is they just don't promote their stuff that well.
Yes.
And so I really wanted to, it was like, hey, how are we going to promote the Amigonauts? And so I was like, you know what, maybe if I get some followers, then I can have like 5 people watching the Amigonauts.
Well, I mean, proof in the pudding, dude. That's how I heard about Amigonauts, was your Instagram account.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there you go. And so I just thought it'd be a lot easier to get people. But I thought I was doing pretty good when I had like 730 followers. And then some people that I work with, they're like 23 years old and they got 10,000. And I'm like, holy man, how'd you do that?
Yeah. So that was actually, it's funny that you bring that up. John Sanford posts quite regularly on Facebook, and there's usually some pretty funny rants. And he said specifically that. He was like, what is with all of my millennial coworkers with like 10K followers on Instagram? What's the deal? You know, how the heck can I get that? And half of the comments that he got were just kind of like fake followers. Like that's not 10. This 23-year-old does not have 10,000 people, you know, following them. Unless they are prolific, you know, like for example, Piper probably has 15K following her. But she also works really freaking hard at it consistently for like 5 years. So like that I can understand. But when you get to someone's profile and you're flipping through and it's like, well, yeah, it's a lot of artwork, but it's also a lot of you at the bar. Like I can't really tell, you know, if these 10,000 followers are legit or not.
That's what I find funny too. It's like I put out a piece of work or something on Instagram. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll get a couple more followers off this one. And then when the young kids on the crew puts up a picture of cheesecake and they get like 1,000 people like this, and it's like, how did you do that? People are actually liking that cheesecake.
I think one of the other comments that was on that post from John was and very intelligent. It was like, so ignore the followers and look at like some of their recent art posts and see what the likes are. Mm-hmm. You know, like, is it something that's being liked because it's got a hashtag on it? Or is it like, well, they have 10,000 followers, but this post that they made has 170 likes. Like, that doesn't make sense if those 10,000 people are legit fans, right?
Yeah.
So it's so hard to quantify social media. I mean, it's so much of it is just throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And I mean, ultimately, I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been my friend Peyton, and he was talking about Scotty Young or maybe some other artist. And essentially, the numbers game was just like, I need to get my number of followers up to 6 figures, because statistically, I can bank on 2% of them, buying a thing. And if I can put a thing out 3 times a year at $20 a thing, then that's my year. It was the math of just like, I can always bank on 2%. So this number has to be ginormous. And there was very little conversation at that time. This was years ago, about the quality therein of the huge amount of following. I've personally never had a big following. I mean, I post a lot of pictures of pancakes and stuff that probably drive people crazy, but it's one of those things that like when I do post artwork, like I'll get 30 or 40 likes, but it's also 30 or 40 legit, people that actually want to see what I'm doing. And I feel like, especially if you're doing things like promoting a TV show or trying to like kind of push your own work, I would focus more on that, because like these days with systems out there, maybe not so much for animation and television, although it's possible. Systems like Patreon, you don't need 10K. You need like a fraction of that just happen to be willing to support you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whether it's, a collection of your character designs in a book, or whether it's, a new show that you're just trying to get enough eyeballs on Kickstarter or something like that. You just need enough people to care about it. You don't necessarily need to have like an entire country, following you to get something off the ground.
That's true. Yeah.
Joel, seriously, pancakes and coffee.
No, I know.
I'm looking at your Instagram now.
The coffee was a joke. The coffee was a thing. I posted a picture of a coffee on a Monday. I was not ready for Monday, and I was just like not ready. And then I got a lot of people laughing at that. So then on Tuesday, I posted the same thing, different cup, and I said still not ready. So then people really started to get into it. And somebody, an artist friend of mine, Janet out in BC, had said, "Is that a Pantone mug? I want it." And then it became this entire joke thing between Janet and I the whole week, about like, I would post a picture and it would be not her favorite Pantone mug, and she would just be like, "That's not the mug. That's not the right mug, Joel." And it went on forever. So I decided I'd do it the whole week. I have had people message me and ask me if I am okay if there is not a picture of pancakes on the weekend. They were just like, "Are you feeling all right? Is everything all right there?"
You're really still pushing that stereotype of the Canadians and the pancakes. Is that a thing?
Hey, I have to keep up something.
But you know what? That also proves your point. I think you're showing that you have a quality number of followers. They really care. If you don't have a pancake picture, they're really caring about you.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I do get a little frustrated though when I do finally have some time to make some drawing and post the drawing, and it gets like 20 likes, and it's like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And then I snap a picture of dinner and it gets like 45, and you're just kind of like, okay,
wait a minute, see your dinner, Joel.
Yeah. It all comes back. Anyway, sorry, that's a long kind of like diatribe into Instagram. I thought it was interesting that you kind of harked on the same point that John was getting at, though.
Yeah, I think that's when you're starting to realize you're getting old, is that you don't fully understand how to get likes.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, you just got to talk when you got to talk to the youngins. You got to pull over the 22-year-old at work and be like, "How the hell does this work? I don't have time to sort this out." Yeah. Well, you can pull that card. You'd be like, "I have a baby at home. I do not have the time. I need you to teach me the Instagram foo that you have acquired."
That works too.
Yeah. So
babies are good for an excuse,
Yeah. So a couple of weeks ago, we spoke to Cleo Chang on the show, and we were talking about like the workload in storyboarding. And I noticed when I was looking at some of the samples on your website that your boards they're nearly animated. Like, forget being animatic, like they're almost keyed. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on the role of a storyboard artist currently in the industry, and the quote unquote industry standard workload.
I think it's changed a lot since, say, the Ren and Stimpy days. If you look at like those boards, they're all about like getting a couple really key poses, and they weren't always about the composition and stuff, because you had, in the 90s and before that, you would have layout artist that would come in and kind of fix your poses and stuff like that, your rough board drawings. Whereas now we don't have that. Like even at Nick, we don't really have that anymore. There's a lot more responsibility on a board artist, and so for me, I like to what I tell my board crew is you got to put your vision, you got to put it all down on the page, like your posing, your backgrounds, everything. Like you got to put on every panel. If you have an idea for something, you got to put it down and you got to be clear about how it's going to work. I find you got to do that in TV. Feature, I'm not really sure. I haven't really played in that ballpark, but with TV, I find that and I find the best board artists too, the people that I've always looked up to and really like their boards. I find the ones that put everything on the page. When you get that episode back for the animation, you see it's such an amazing episode because everything was captured that you wanted. That there was no guessing along the way. You're laying out a blueprint for everybody down the line to follow. And so with my boards, I try and have everything in there. Like if I want a subtle movement from a character as they're stumbling over their words, or if I want a big action, I just try and make sure that everything is in there. And but yeah, it's really changed, and the workload can be tough. In Canada, it was a 4-week schedule for an 11-minute episode, but in the States here, it's 6 weeks. And so I found when I came here to Nick, I felt like the fastest kid in town because I was on a 4-week schedule. You show up and you get 6 weeks, and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. You got 6 weeks to work on something. I could really plus it and make it even better. So I found with the Loud House stuff, I could really spend more time on my board. But in Canada, it can be a little tougher just because you only have that 4 weeks. And so if they watch the page count on a script, you're usually pretty good. Like I like to make sure on the Amigonauts, we had a rule that board couldn't be, or the script couldn't be any longer than 14 pages, and that way the board artist had enough time to breathe and could put some love into it. Sometimes you'd work on a show where like it's a 20-page script and the board artist is killing themselves working, 12-hour days, 7 days a week just to get that board done, and then you end up cutting 4 minutes of it in the animatic. Then you just wasted so much time, and board artists just killed themselves just trying to get what was on the page down. They couldn't put any of their own thing into it,
Yeah. Interesting, because Cleo works in the film industry, and the argument there was to, granted they wanted to, there's different departments, they wanted to map out, the plan and have there be not a lot of guessing, but they also wanted to let the animators do their magic. Now it was also a CG pipeline. So she'd be doing, boards, and then it would go to like a CG rigging, and then the character would be animated in the computer and stuff like that. But they were saying like, why are you getting the board artist? Not that it's a lot of time, but like giving the number of times a blink would happen or whatever, and they would ended up boarding that. And it's like, well, yes, you have to do some posing, and yes, you have to do some storytelling, but like let the animator handle the subtle winks and nods and things like that. And ultimately there was a movement at the studio to go back and have a little bit less from the board artists. And I'm wondering also if that allowed them to put kind of, like you said, like their little love and oomph, to it, their personal touch on it.
Oh, definitely. Like I think like in feature, you have a lot more of that freedom. I just remember like when being able to be part of all different facets of the pipeline, I could kind of understand how all the different departments work. And when I first started as an animator, we were paid by frame. And so,
oh, wow, really?
Yeah, every week to pay rent, you're working off of like you're trying to bust these scenes out so you can pay rent and maybe buy a beer on the weekend.
Yep. No, back in 2005-ish, it was about $1 a frame.
Yeah.
And it was basically just a way. The region had hit, at least in Halifax and like in the Maritimes, the region had hit kind of a boom where there was more work than there were people. So ultimately, you would run into a quality problem because half of your staff would be new because they're fresh out of school. The other half, who were earning the same weekly salary, would be like, 10-year veterans and like circling the new people. So ultimately, you'd have the motivation for the more frames that you do that are approved, the bigger your paycheck is going to be. To keep people on task and keep people off of Facebook and stuff like that at work.
It also contains your budget too, because you can give a budget and you know exactly how much it's going to cost.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, if you're running late, it was a matter of timing, but not a matter of workload, because ultimately the show is only going to be so many frames, so you already had the budget for that. And then you'd have other people, like the real go-getters, that would be maybe maybe slightly more talented people in their graduating class, or people that had a year under them and that just had nothing but time. Animation around here was and probably still is a lot of young single people that didn't have a lot of outside influences on their time. Yeah. So you'd have people doing 1,000 frames a week just because they're 23 and they like the paycheck,
Yeah.
And if it's approved, then hey, that just means that the show is going to look even better and be done sooner.
Did anybody die during that time?
There were a few.
Maybe, maybe. But the other problem that we had in the industry, and I don't know whether the U.S. has the same problem, but the shows here, they'd come and go, so you'd never have a full year of work. Like ultimately, you'd be out of work for a few months a year, and for some people that meant leaving the province, and then they'd get another job, and that would be 6 or 8 months in Ottawa or Montreal. But then when the studio here would get a new gig, half of their crew had left because they needed to keep working to pay student loans, right? So you'd have to start fresh again. And so that is one of the other things that brought in the payment per frame. I feel like, now I've been out of touch with it for a while, but I feel like the swing has come back the other way now, and it's now back to salary.
I think what they're trying to do, Loud House it's animated at Jamfield in Ottawa.
Okay.
And so, which actually worked out great. I moved to LA, and then half my friends that I started animating with 10 years ago, they're all big shots now at Jamfield. So I knew most of the crew.
Nice.
And then a lot of Disney stuff is done at Mercury, which is 2 doors down. But I think that what they try to do, because now again, there's this big boom, and so there's more work than there's talent. And so they're still paying a lot of people by frame, but there's a core group of artists, people that have been there, they're vets, they're really talented, they know what they're doing. A lot of them get on the payroll, or on salary.
On salary, yeah.
And so that's kind of how it works. But I find back to the boarding question, what makes it different than the feature, I know what it's like to be an animator on Thursday or say Friday at 5 o'clock, and I got to hand in my quota, and I got a couple scenes, and the board artist didn't, explain exactly what they wanted. So I'm going to guess, and I'm going to make that decision pretty quick, because I'm a TV animator. I don't have a lot of time to play around.
Yeah.
And I know what that's like. I know what that situation is. A lot of times, some animators they have the time, and they do a lot of beautiful stuff on Loud House. But I also know when things get into the crunch, and so I tell my board artists, you just got to think that everyone down the line, they're just trying to get their job done. They don't want to be working 14 hours a day because you didn't board properly. So if you have a vision for something, put it down, and you're going to be loved by everybody. If you put your vision down, everyone down the line is going to love you because you put in so much. And I think it helps more in TV, but feature, that's a whole different ballgame. Like your animators, everybody there has way more time than even TV, and more time, more money, more resources and everything. So, and that right there, they go through the shots over and over. I can't even remember what the quota is for on Disney, but you got so much time to really milk a scene. But yeah, I can understand them saying hey, let's just hand this to the animator. Whereas TV, everything's a lot faster and dirtier.
Yeah.
So I that's why I try and say get your stuff down on the page so you know it's going to come back.
Yeah, I mean, revisions on a feature can't get out of hand, but I mean, when you're looking at releasing something 4 years from now, you definitely have time to go back over the scene, as opposed to having it released 4 weeks from now.
Yeah. No, for sure.
That is outrageous. Okay, so you moved to LA from Canada, correct?
Yep.
Back in 2014, was it? When was it?
We're in 17 right now, right? 15.
Yeah. All right, 2015. So was that a big risk for you at the time? Was that okay, we're packing up, family. We're heading to Tinseltown. Come on, let's go.
It was at first I had always wanted to work in California. I always wanted to kind of give it a shot.
Right.
And Nickelodeon had contacted me about doing some boards, and so my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, we kind of sat down and said, hey, do we want to do this? And, because it's going to mean she's going to have to uproot her life, and she's not going to be able to work for the first couple of years because of the visa, the work visa I'll be on. And so we talked about it, and we said that at the time we didn't have any kids or anything, so we thought it was now or never, because I've heard from some buddies that they thought they would wait a bit and then they'd have a kid, and then once having a family, it's a lot tougher to make that big move, because when you come down, the States don't really they don't really care about your credit in Canada. Like we both owned condos in Ottawa, and we showed up here and the bank wouldn't give us more than a $300 credit card.
It's tough here with the credit, man.
And so it was a thing where we basically had to start over again, and that would be really tough for the family. So so it was good. Like, my wife was really supportive, and she thought, get away from the snow for a little while, and kind of packed up her stuff and came down. It was a little scary at first, because I remember Loud House hadn't aired yet. I was here for like 5 months, and my visa, the way it works, is if I get canned, I have 10 days to get another job, or I got to get another country.
Wow, that is crazy short.
Yeah, so you got to line up your gigs. And so when I first started, I talked to my producer and just said, hey, if you know that we're going to be getting canceled a couple months ahead, please give me a heads up, because I don't want to get, caught in a bad situation.
Right.
And the first 6 months, I got here in like April, and then in like November, they kind of go around and they tell all the shows at different times during a day who's getting greenlit, who's getting canceled, whatnot. And there was one day where we all got an email saying our time was at 3:30, that the executives would come talk to us, and I was freaking out. And I was telling my friends back home, like, Loud House hasn't even aired yet. We don't know if it's going to be a good show. You might see me back in Canada in 10 days.
Oh.
But we got through that, and then I was really lucky because we got onto a hit show. Loud House it's one of the #1 shows right now in the States, and so we're trucking along. And now I know enough people that if something happened that I end up losing my job, I might be able to jump over to some other stuff. And I know some other Canadians now that have really jumped around a lot. They keep just getting new visas every time they go to a different studio. So. So it's like any big move. It's tough in the beginning, but at the same time, it's kind of an exciting adventure,
Yeah, I mean, it's a bigger move than, I don't know. I always think of Canada just as kind of part of the U.S. Lots of times when I think if you get a job in L.A., I'm like, well, that's easy enough. You just get in your car and you head on down there. But wow, I didn't think about the fact that, what, you said 10 days?
Yeah, 10 days you got to scoot.
That's crazy. Get out of here, you Canadian bums. What are you sitting around your laurels? 10 days?
Yeah, exactly. I guess they just don't trust us. Meaning they're longer than 10 days.
That is crazy, man.
But it was a little tough in the beginning with you spend a lot of money on that move. LA's not a cheap city.
No.
Oh, that was a little tough, and we were a little worried in the beginning because with Canada, we have the good healthcare and everything, and so moving to the States, that's always every Canadian's first concern. It's like, oh, what am I going to do about healthcare? So the first 6 months, my wife and I just kind of wore a helmet and knee pads everywhere, and because then after those first 6 months, the union, they got a great animation union here in LA, and great. You got to work for 6 months before you can get in it, and then once you're in, you're set. And it was great. So a couple months later, after I got into the union, my appendix blew up.
Oh my gosh!
Wow.
And we got the bill for it. I was in the hospital, like the surgery and everything. I think I was in the hospital for like 8 hours or something like that total. And we got the bill back, and it was like 26 grand.
Yeah, welcome to America, baby.
Wow.
Yeah, well, it was good to be part of the for that one.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but does Ottawa have a union? Because I know there's no union around here.
No, there's no unions in Canada.
No, there's no. Well, not for animation anyway.
No.
Because I remember, again, probably back in 2004 through 6-ish, that there was mumbles of not a union, but some sort of organization or board or something, just to kind of like regulate salaries and kind of like make, because there's still animators being quote unquote stolen from one studio to go to the other and all that kind of stuff. It's
happened a lot in Ottawa.
Yeah, it was happening a lot here too. Just from rumors, like I know nothing, but just the murmurs that you hear when you're in the artist community, and but every time a they would never call it a union because that would send flags everywhere. But like whenever they mention this, any kind of organized thing, the studios would squash it.
Yeah. It's I think I've heard when I was in Canada for 10 years or so, it was, there would always be rumblings that something might be starting, but nothing's really ever happened. And now I know Ottawa is even in Toronto, it's an artist. Like they're running, if all the studios, there's so much work and the top end talent, there's not enough to fill the work. And so right now it's a good time to be an artist.
Right.
But that always flips. Like there's, and then probably when it flips in 10 years, all of a sudden the artists will be wanting a union.
Yeah, right. Yeah. We need a union quick.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, see, but at that point, all of those young artists have got husbands, wives, homes, children, mortgages. And then when the salary starts to dip or the salary hasn't changed in 10 years, then they're like, well, wait a minute. This was all, hot applesauce when I was 22. But now that I'm 20, now that I'm 35, this is not so good.
Yeah, love it. Oh, hey, you know what? I sent a feeler on Twitter on our Comics Coast to Coast, and I asked people to ask questions, and I had actually Mike Cope of Cope Tunes send in me too. He sent a no question. He said no questions, but love that show.
Well, that's good.
Looking forward to listening. So thank you, Mike. Also, my 9-year-old who watches the Loud Family, or the Loud House, excuse me, she wants to know, why do we hardly ever see the parents? Yeah, you don't know, do you?
Do you mean their faces? Or
their faces. Their faces, yeah.
Well, in the first season, it was a whole kind of thing where we weren't going to reveal the parents' faces, and then I can reveal it now because it's been long gone. But in the Christmas episode, there was a special 22-minute episode that the parents' faces got revealed for the first time. And so now in the second season, I think they've only showed, it's so funny because we're like a season and a half ahead of what's airing.
Right.
Stuff like that. And so I think right now where we are, the parents haven't been in it too much, but you see their faces now. I think a lot of it was, it's not about the parents. It's about Lincoln and his sisters being this obstacle. And so we didn't see the parents too much. But now we're starting to, there's going to be some episodes that are more parent involved that are a lot of fun that'll be coming.
Yeah. There's a lot of characters in that show. So, I mean.
There are.
It's good. It's good. Oh, well, thank you for answering her question. She'll truly appreciate that. Yeah. So now this is the part where usually Matt interrupts and breaks in because we only have a few more minutes left in the show. And he asked the last question ever. We call it Pay It Forward. So can you share an artist that you follow or like that you might want to recommend and give a good praise to?
Oh man,
I know there's so many, right? You've already mentioned a few, right? We've talked about a few.
So many
on the show.
Really, one you might want to see interviewed on the show.
Oh, there you go.
You know what? There's a guy that does incredible special effects. He's a traditional animator. His name's Chris Graff, and if you're looking for artists that do some cool stuff, I don't know. Have you guys interviewed any effects artists?
Not that I recall.
No,
he's actually in Ottawa. I would say run out and he'd be an interesting interview. He's also from Saskatchewan, where I'm from, and his effects work is just absolutely incredible.
Chris Graff, that's with one F, right?
With one F. Yeah. So I would say definitely check out him, and then. Oh man, there's just so anyone I mentioned so far. I would say there's
It's always a tough question because you have, especially when you're working with so many great artists, you don't want to
work with so many great artists. And people. There's a. Can I just do two more?
Oh, you can do as many as you want.
There's a guy I work with on Loud House that he does incredible boards. His name's Miguel Puga, and I think
I'm gonna need a spelling on that one after the show.
Puga. Is last name. He does just an incredible artist. And then on the other side of it, a guy I write with, We wrote Amigonaut episodes. We just finished actually writing a Loud House episode, and we did some for Atomic Puppet. His name is John McKinnon, and he's an editor. He does a lot of great stuff. Yeah, I could just keep going and going, but I should stop.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, we love it too. If you think of somebody else later on, you can always email it to us. But you know what? That's it. We've had a great time, Kyle.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Oh wow, you guys have been. I loved it so much. Usually, I'm the talker, and Joel's the sitter downer. But tonight,
you just let two Canadians go at it.
Yeah,
dude.
Yeah.
I mean, it was fantastic. I almost broke in a couple of times. I'm like, why would I break up this beautiful thing that is happening right now? And so I kept my mouth shut. So, Kyle, where's the best place for people to visit you online one more time before we?
Yeah, you know what? I don't use my Instagram as much, but House of Kyle, my Tumblr, and then Kyle's Sandwiches and Ice Cream on Instagram. So
excellent. Well, good luck to you. We look forward to talking to you again sometime in the near future.
Sounds good.
I also look forward to getting to see 3 Amigonauts, even if I have to take my browser and pretend like I'm in Canada.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Joel.
Don't think I won't do it. All right, Joel, thank you for being on the show, Mr. Forge Publishing. Where can people visit you on the web?
On the web, you can go to forgepublishing.com. You can also go to joelduggan.com. That connects to all the social media. It's all just my name. It's really easy to find. And if you are in Halifax this weekend, then you can go to HalCon and visit me and Piper. She's here too. I actually met her for the first time this afternoon. So she's at table A9. I am at table H16. That's both in the Scotiabank Center. I'm in the vendor area. She's a guest artist. Piper's going to be doing a panel. I'm going to be doing a podcasting panel tomorrow night. All of it is at hal-con.com. You can find the schedule, the map, all of it. And we've got lots of daily paintings, art books to come and get. And as I mentioned on my other podcast, The Citadel Cafe, on Tuesday night, Piper has been doing this for 5 years. This is the very, very first time ever that she's been able to sell prints, sell books to people in person. So
that's great.
It is a real cool opportunity to get a book signed in person by Piper. And she's super excited because, of course, it's her first book and her first con and all this kind of stuff. So we're both really excited to showcase daily painting. So come on over to HalCon. They're doing a great job organizing everything over there. So that's hal-con.com. And, of course, Piper and Forge on social media, you'll be able to find out what's going on, too.
That's great. I don't know who this Hal guy is, but he sounds awesome. Also, you can follow Comics Coast to Coast on Twitter at ComicsC2C. Follow me, the Brian Dunaway. Follow Matt the Wad. You can actually go to YouTube. That's what he usually says to do, and look up Matt the Wad. If you have questions or have interviews that you would like to suggest, send them to guys@comicscoasttocoast.com. That's it. Thank you guys so much. I had a blast.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys next week.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
It's most of those gamers, man. Those young folk.
They're changing the world.
They're changing the world. I don't know what to do with them.